Back in the days of the Great Depression, when every dollar was stretched to its limit, families had to get inventive, turning basic ingredients into meals that would fill their bellies and warm their hearts. Today, we're uncovering 25 Depression-era recipes that were passed down in old cookbooks. Dishes that tell the story of survival, ingenuity, and the love that went into every meal. Wacky cake, the chocolate cake that needed no eggs. During the Great Depression, eggs were a luxury that many families simply couldn't afford. Enter the ingenious creation of wacky cake, a chocolate cake that required none of those elusive ingredients, no eggs, no butter, and no milk. What this cake lacked in expensive ingredients, it made up for in sheer deliciousness and ease. The beauty of wacky cake was in its simplicity, allowing anyone, regardless of their budget, to enjoy a rich, moist chocolate treat. The story of wacky cake begins with the need for resourceful baking in an era where most home cooks had to work with what was available. When eggs were too costly or unavailable, cooks had to get creative. Wacky cake was the perfect solution. It could be mixed in a single pan, stirred up quickly, and baked to perfection. Not only was it a cheap dessert, but it was also the type of cake you could whip up without much planning, making it a favorite for families who had to manage their time and resources carefully. To make this Depression-era cake, you'll need basic pantry staples. Start with flour, sugar, and cocoa powder. Then mix in baking soda, which helps the cake rise in the absence of eggs. The wet ingredients come together in a mixture of water, vegetable oil, and a splash of vanilla for flavor. And here's the secret ingredient, a dash of vinegar. When combined with the baking soda, the vinegar helps to create a light, airy texture. You may think a chocolate cake without eggs would be dense or heavy, but this recipe proves you wrong. The combination of ingredients delivers a surprisingly tender crumb with a rich, chocolatey flavor that would satisfy even the most dedicated cake lover. Wacky cake's versatility is also one of its winning traits. It could be enjoyed plain or dressed up with a simple dusting of powdered sugar, a dollop of whipped cream, or a drizzle of chocolate syrup. In some households, it was even served as an everyday snack cake, showing how it became a regular feature in Depression-era kitchens. You could serve it at a family dinner or share it at a church potluck, and nobody would know it was made out of thrift and necessity. The best part? Wacky cake was a dessert that anyone could make, regardless of baking experience. The ingredients were basic, the instructions simple, and the results were always satisfying. Even if you didn't have a fancy mixer or a fully stocked kitchen, this cake could be whipped up by hand and enjoyed by all. It's a testament to the resourcefulness and ingenuity of home cooks during the Depression, who made sure that even in the hardest times, there was always room for a little sweetness. Cornmeal mush, a starchy comfort. When times were tough during the Great Depression, families had to rely on inexpensive, filling foods to stretch their meals. Cornmeal mush became a beloved staple in many households. Simple, comforting, and inexpensive cornmeal mush was the kind of dish that could take you from a grumbling stomach to a satisfied one with little more than a few basic pantry ingredients: cornmeal, water, and salt. Often served as a breakfast or dinner dish, cornmeal mush was the epitome of making do with what you had. This dish has its roots in the southern and Appalachian regions, where cornmeal was a key ingredient in everyday cooking. The beauty of cornmeal mush lies in its versatility. In its simplest form, it's a savory dish, served piping hot with a pinch of salt. The creamy texture, made as the cornmeal absorbs water and thickens, provides a comforting warmth that was especially appreciated during the cold winter months. The smell of it cooking, rich and earthy, was the kind of homey aroma that defined Depression-era kitchens, where every meal had to count. To make cornmeal mush, start by bringing water to a boil in a pot. Once the water is hot, slowly whisk in the cornmeal, ensuring it doesn't clump together. Stir constantly until the mixture thickens into a smooth, creamy consistency. The whole process is quick and straightforward, which was a blessing when time and resources were in short supply. A pinch of salt adds just enough flavor to make the dish complete. Once it's done, you have a warm, comforting base that can be enjoyed as is or dressed up depending on what's available. Many families would serve their cornmeal mush with syrup, honey, or molasses to add a touch of sweetness, while others would top it with butter and milk for a richer taste. In some cases, leftover mush could be fried into crispy cakes, creating a new meal for the next day, making it even more economical. This flexibility was one of the reasons cornmeal mush was so beloved. It could be served as a hearty breakfast to fuel the day or as a filling dinner side dish. Cornmeal mush wasn't just practical, it was also a reminder of how resourcefulness could turn something simple into a satisfying meal. It was the kind of dish that brought comfort in a time of uncertainty, a symbol of the Depression-era spirit where nothing went to waste. Whether sweet or savory, mush was a dependable and affordable dish that kept families nourished during one of the most challenging times in American history. And in a way, it still holds a place in our hearts, reminding us that even the most humble ingredients can be transformed into something that fills both the belly and the soul. Potato soup, a filling bowl of comfort. Potatoes were the unsung heroes of many Depression-era kitchens, often serving as the backbone of meals that stretched tight budgets without sacrificing flavor or satisfaction. Potato soup, in its most basic form, was the ultimate comfort food during those tough times. A dish born out of necessity, it offered a filling, hearty meal with just a few humble ingredients, making it a perfect choice for families who needed to make every penny count. Yet, despite its simplicity, this soup was so satisfying that it quickly became a beloved staple on dinner tables across the country. The beauty of potato soup lies in its adaptability. In the Depression, when meat was often a luxury, potatoes could be the star of the dish. Made with a base of onions, potatoes, and broth, the soup could be dressed up or down depending on what was available. Some recipes added a splash of milk or a pat of butter, while others used whatever scraps of bacon, ham, or leftover vegetables they had on hand. It was a recipe built on resourcefulness, simple ingredients transformed into a warming, nourishing meal. To make this comforting soup, start by chopping up a few potatoes and onions. You'll need to saute the onions in a little bit of fat, often butter or bacon drippings, to bring out their sweetness. Once softened, add the potatoes to the pot, followed by a good amount of water or broth. Season with salt and pepper, then let the mixture simmer until the potatoes are tender and the flavors meld together. For a creamier texture, a little milk or flour could be added to thicken it up. In many households, potato soup was an inexpensive way to feed a family, especially when meat was scarce. But the best part of this dish was that it didn't need anything fancy to be delicious. The natural starches in the potatoes helped thicken the broth, giving it a rich, comforting texture. Some families even mashed a portion of the potatoes directly in the pot, creating a thicker, heartier version of the soup. While the recipe could vary depending on available ingredients, the soul of potato soup was always the same: a filling, budget-friendly dish that could stretch a long way. It was the kind of food you'd find simmering on the stove all day, the aroma filling the home with warmth and reassurance. Whether served as a meal on its own or paired with a slice of homemade bread, potato soup was one of those dishes that could bring comfort to even the most challenging of days. Potato soup wasn't just a meal. It was a symbol of the resilience and creativity that defined Depression-era cooking. It was the kind of dish that proved you didn't need fancy ingredients to make something delicious. With just a few potatoes and a bit of imagination, you could create a meal that nourished both body and spirit. Even today, as we gather around our tables, potato soup remains a reminder of simpler times, offering a warm embrace of comfort and familiarity. Biscuits and gravy, a simple, satisfying meal. In the midst of the Great Depression, when every penny counted, biscuits and gravy became a beloved dish for families looking for a hearty, comforting meal that didn't require expensive ingredients. It's a dish that has its roots in Southern cooking, but found its way onto many Depression-era tables, offering a filling breakfast or dinner that could feed a family without breaking the bank. While it may sound like a luxury today, during the Depression, it was a practical, down-to-earth meal that used ingredients many households had on hand. The beauty of biscuits and gravy lies in its simplicity and versatility. The biscuits themselves are made from basic ingredients: flour, baking powder, shortening, and a splash of milk. They rise up to be soft, flaky pillows of bread that are just begging to be smothered in rich, savory gravy. And that gravy, oh, that gravy, was made from bacon drippings or sausage fat, flour, and milk, creating a creamy, flavorful sauce that brings the whole dish together. To make the biscuits, you'll start by mixing the dry ingredients, flour, baking powder, and a pinch of salt, before cutting in the shortening until the mixture resembles coarse crumbs. Then, add the milk and stir until a dough forms. The dough is rolled out, cut into rounds, and baked until golden brown. The result is a biscuit that's crisp on the outside and tender on the inside, perfect for soaking up that rich gravy. The gravy is where the magic happens. In a skillet, you start by heating up the bacon drippings or sausage fat, whatever you have available, then adding flour to make a roux. The roux is cooked for a few minutes to get rid of the raw flour taste, and then milk is slowly added, stirring constantly until the gravy thickens to a creamy consistency. Season it with salt and pepper to taste, and you've got yourself a gravy that's savory, comforting, and just a little bit indulgent, despite being made with such simple, inexpensive ingredients. Biscuits and gravy was often served as a filling breakfast, providing the energy needed to get through the day, but it wasn't limited to mornings. It was a meal that could easily double as a hearty dinner when times were especially tight. The best part, it was incredibly easy to scale up, making it ideal for large families or feeding a crowd during difficult times. You could also stretch it by adding a bit of leftover meat, like sausage or bacon, to the gravy, making it even heartier. For many families, biscuits and gravy were more than just a meal. They were a comforting reminder of the resilience and ingenuity that defined Depression-era kitchens. The dish was a celebration of simple, affordable ingredients that, when combined with a little care and love, could create something extraordinary. It's a reminder that even when times were tough, there was always room for a little bit of indulgence, and sometimes it was the simplest meals that could bring the most joy. Today, as we dig into a plate of biscuits and gravy, we're not just tasting the past. We're honoring the resourcefulness and heart of those who made do with what they had. Victory Gardens Stew, a garden-to-table creation. During the Great Depression, many families turned to victory gardens as a way to supplement their food supply, growing everything from carrots to cabbage in whatever spare space they had. The Victory Garden movement wasn't just about growing food, it was about providing a sense of self-sufficiency and resilience during tough times. One of the most comforting and resourceful dishes to come out of this era was the Victory Gardens Stew, a simple, hearty meal made with whatever vegetables were in season, often supplemented with a small amount of meat if available. This stew embodies the spirit of Depression-era cooking, making do with what's at hand and creating something nourishing and filling from humble ingredients. The recipe itself varies depending on what you have in your garden or pantry, but the base remains the same: root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and onions, along with a broth to tie it all together. For many, it was a dish that could stretch for days, often growing even more flavorful as the ingredients melded together over time. To make this stew, you'll start by chopping up your vegetables. Potatoes and carrots are the backbone of the dish, offering both flavor and substance. If you have any leftover meat, like a bit of ham or bacon, you can toss that in too, but it's not strictly necessary. The beauty of this stew is that it can be made meatless and still be satisfying. Once your vegetables are ready, saute some onions in a little bit of fat, like bacon drippings or oil, until they're soft and fragrant. This step adds a deep, savory flavor to the dish. Next, add your chopped vegetables to the pot along with water or broth. If you have any fresh herbs from the garden, toss those in too. Thyme, parsley, or even a bay leaf can add an extra layer of richness to the flavor. Let the stew simmer for about an hour, allowing the vegetables to soften and the flavors to meld together. You'll want to season it with salt and pepper to taste, and if you're lucky enough to have a bit of leftover meat, the savory bits will add even more depth to the dish. The beauty of Victory Gardens. Stew lies in its flexibility. It's a dish that doesn't require precision, just the willingness to use whatever vegetables and scraps are available. Onions, potatoes, carrots, peas, or even green beans can be thrown in without much thought. In times when protein was scarce, the focus was on the bounty of the garden, and this stew could easily be transformed into a filling meal that would feed a family for days. Victory Gardens. Stew wasn't just a practical dish, it was a testament to the resourcefulness of families during the Depression. It symbolized the self-sufficiency of the era, where making use of every garden vegetable and every leftover scrap was not just a necessity, but a matter of pride. Even today, when we make this humble stew, we're not just recreating a meal, we're honoring the spirit of those who used what little they had to create something truly nourishing and comforting. Whether served with a slice of cornbread or a piece of buttered toast, it's a reminder that even in the hardest times, a little creativity in the kitchen could create something truly heartwarming. Creamed chipped beef on toast, a simple, satisfying classic. One of the most iconic and budget-friendly dishes to come out of the Depression era is creamed chipped beef on toast, often affectionately referred to as SOS or SHT on a shingle. This dish, born out of necessity, was an ingenious way to stretch a small amount of meat into a meal that could feed a family. Though its name might be a little unappetizing, this hearty comfort food was beloved for its ability to turn a few pantry staples into something warm and filling. The main ingredient in this dish, chipped beef, was a cost-effective, long-lasting meat that could be stored for weeks. Often sold in jars or dried, chipped beef was a staple in Depression-era kitchens because it was inexpensive and could be used in a variety of ways. When combined with a creamy, savory white sauce and served over toast, chipped beef transformed into a hearty, satisfying meal. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable, exactly what you needed when times were tough. To make cream-chipped beef on toast, begin by heating a few tablespoons of butter in a pan. Once melted, stir in some flour to make a roux, which will form the base of your creamy sauce. You'll want to cook the roux for a few minutes to get rid of the raw flour taste, and then slowly add milk while stirring to ensure the sauce thickens smoothly. Season the sauce with salt and pepper to taste, and then fold in the chipped beef. The beef, when rehydrated and simmered in the creamy sauce, takes on a savory, rich flavor, adding a meaty depth to the dish without being overwhelming. While the sauce simmers, toast a few slices of bread. Once toasted, ladle the creamy chipped beef mixture generously over the top, creating a simple but indulgent meal. The combination of the creamy sauce with the crisp toast offers a satisfying contrast in textures, and the richness of the dish makes it feel like a true comfort food. Creamed chipped beef on toast was not only a frugal way to feed a family, but it also provided the kind of warmth and sustenance that was so needed during hard times. It was a dish that could be quickly put together with what was on hand, and its simplicity meant it could be easily scaled up if you were feeding a crowd. Some families even added a sprinkle of paprika on top for a little extra flavor, or a handful of peas for some color and nutrition. In many ways, cream-chipped beef on toast became a symbol of the resourcefulness and resilience that defined the Depression era. It was a dish that could take a small amount of meat and turn it into a filling, comforting meal that lasted. While it may not be the most glamorous dish, it's a reminder that sometimes the most satisfying meals come from the simplest ingredients, and that with a little creativity, you can make the most of what you have, even in the toughest of times. Mock chicken, a meatless meat. During the Great Depression, chicken was a luxury few families could afford on a regular basis, so many cooks got creative with their meals. One clever invention that emerged from this necessity was mock chicken, a dish that mimicked the flavor and texture of chicken without the expense of actually using it. This resourceful recipe often turned to cheaper cuts of meat, such as pork or beef or even vegetables, to recreate the comforting essence of a chicken dinner. It was a meal that could be adapted based on what was available, making it a staple for many families who needed to stretch their food supply as far as possible. The magic of mock chicken lies in its ability to recreate a sense of a hearty, meaty meal without requiring expensive ingredients. For many home cooks, it was the perfect way to make the family feel like they were having a special dinner, even when their resources were limited. Depending on what they had on hand, cooks could use a variety of substitutes, but the idea remained the same. Make something hearty and filling that could feed the whole family on a shoestring budget. To make mock chicken, start by choosing a substitute for the meat. Many Depression-era recipes used inexpensive cuts of pork or beef, or even things like rice, potatoes, and vegetables to simulate the texture and bulk of chicken. The dish is usually cooked with a rich, flavorful sauce, often a creamy white sauce made from milk, butter, and flour, which helps to bind everything together and adds a comforting richness to the dish. If using pork or beef, it would be cut into small pieces or shredded, and the sauce would help to give it that juicy, tender feel you expect from a chicken dish. Once your meat or veggie substitute is cooked through and tender, the next step is to assemble your dish. Pour the creamy sauce over the cooked meat or vegetables, ensuring everything is well-coated and flavorful. Mock chicken is typically served over rice, mashed potatoes, or bread, turning a small portion of meat or veggies into a meal that could fill many hungry stomachs. The versatility of mock chicken made it even more appealing. If meat was scarce, a vegetarian version could be made using mashed potatoes, breadcrumbs, and seasoning to create a similar texture. The sauce could be thickened or thinned based on personal preference, and herbs like thyme, sage, or parsley could be used to add a bit of flavor. This adaptability meant that cooks could make it work with whatever they had in their pantry or garden, and it could be adjusted to feed a crowd or serve just a few. Mock chicken wasn't just a way to save money, it was a shining example of the ingenuity that defined Depression-era cooking. It's a dish that highlights how, with a little creativity, you could turn simple, inexpensive ingredients into something that felt like a treat, a way to make the most of what you had and create something hearty and satisfying. Even though it might not have been chicken, it still provided the comfort and nourishment that families needed to get through tough times, and it became a beloved dish that many continue to cherish today. Red flannel hash, a hearty, colorful leftover dish. Red flannel hash is the quintessential Depression-era leftover dish designed to turn small amounts of meat and vegetables into a colorful, hearty meal. During the Great Depression, when food was scarce, waste was simply not an option, and red flannel hash embodied the resourcefulness that defined the era. It used whatever ingredients were available, leftover corned beef, potatoes, onions, and even the occasional beet, to create a satisfying, filling dish that could feed an entire family. The star of red flannel hash is, of course, the corned beef. But this dish is not one to be strict about ingredients. While corned beef was commonly used, any leftover meat could be thrown into the mix, whether it was roast beef, ham, or even scraps from a chicken. The key was to finely chop the meat so it could be evenly distributed throughout the dish, giving every bite a little bit of that savory goodness. The potatoes in red flannel hash not only provided the bulk of the dish, but also the starchy texture that made it so filling. As the potatoes cooked with the meat, they absorbed all the flavors, turning into soft, tender bits that melded perfectly with the other ingredients. Onions were also a must, adding sweetness and a savory depth to the mix. But it's the beets that give red flannel hash its signature color. Often included as a way to brighten up the dish, beets lend a rich, reddish hue, transforming this humble hash into something vibrant and eye-catching. To make this classic dish, start by cooking some diced potatoes until they are tender but not mushy. Meanwhile, chop up the leftover meat into small pieces and set aside. In a large skillet, heat some oil or bacon fat, then sauté the onions until they are soft and translucent. Add the potatoes to the pan and let them brown slightly, stirring occasionally. Once the potatoes are nicely browned, throw in the leftover meat, followed by the beets if you're using them. Stir everything together until it's well combined and heated through. You can season with salt, pepper, and any additional spices you have on hand. Some people even added a dash of paprika or a sprinkle of parsley for a little extra flavor. The beauty of red flannel hash was that it could be made with whatever you had in your pantry or fridge. If you didn't have beets, you could make it without them. If there was no leftover meat, you could even skip it and just focus on the potatoes and onions. The dish was always adaptable, a true reflection of the creativity and practicality that defined Depression-era cooking. Whether served for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, red flannel hash could easily be stretched to feed a family, making it a go-to meal for frugal cooks. This dish also had the added benefit of being a complete meal in one pan. The combination of meat, potatoes, and vegetables provided all the necessary nutrients, protein, carbs, and vitamins without needing to prepare multiple dishes. And best of all, it was delicious. Crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and filled with savory, earthy flavors, red flannel hash became a comforting, beloved dish that was perfect for stretching a little bit of leftovers into something filling and satisfying. Today, red flannel hash serves as a reminder of how our ancestors turned what seemed like scraps into a meal that was greater than the sum of its parts. It's a dish that speaks to the heart of Depression-era ingenuity, using what you have, making the most of it, and turning it into something that could feed not just your body, but your soul. Depression-era bread, the easiest, most basic loaf. When the Great Depression hit, it brought with it a sense of uncertainty, but it also sparked a wave of ingenuity in American kitchens. Ingredients were scarce, and families had to get creative to make meals stretch. One of the most essential and cost-effective staples that emerged from this era was Depression-era bread. Made with just a few basic ingredients, flour, water, salt, and yeast, this simple loaf became a symbol of resilience and practicality. It was the backbone of many Depression-era meals, feeding families through tough times with minimal expense. What made this bread so special wasn't just its simplicity, it was the sense of security it brought to the table. During the Depression, store-bought bread was often too expensive for many families. So, people turned to homemade versions, using basic ingredients they could afford and often had in abundance. With the rising cost of goods, this bread was an opportunity for families to take control of their food and make something nourishing from very little. To make this Depression-era bread, you start with flour, which was the primary ingredient in many Depression-era recipes. Flour was a staple in nearly every pantry, and it could be transformed into so many different types of meals, from cakes to dumplings to, of course, bread. In a large bowl, you mix the flour with a pinch of salt, which enhances the flavor. Then, in a separate small bowl, dissolve the yeast in warm water and add a bit of sugar to help activate the yeast. Once the yeast mixture becomes frothy, you combine it with the flour mixture and stir it all together into a sticky dough. Kneading this dough is a crucial part of the process. In the Depression era, it wasn't about fancy machines or mixers, it was all about elbow grease. Knead the dough for about 10 minutes, folding and pressing it until it becomes smooth and elastic. Kneading was not just a task, it was an act of care and patience, the kind of slow, thoughtful work that marked the Depression era. Once your dough is ready, you let it rise, covering it with a cloth and setting it in a warm place. The dough would need about an hour to double in size. After the dough has risen, it's time to shape it into a loaf and place it into a greased baking pan. The loaf is then covered again and allowed to rise for another 30 minutes. This double rising process is what gives the bread its soft, fluffy texture. While it's rising, you can preheat the oven to around 375 degrees. Once it's ready, bake the bread for 25 to 30 minutes, or until it's golden brown on top and makes a hollow sound when tapped on the bottom. The end result is a loaf that's simple, crusty, and incredibly satisfying. The texture is soft and airy, perfect for slathering with butter or serving with a hearty soup or stew. Depression-era bread might not have been the fancy sweet loaves we often see today, but it was a bread that brought warmth and comfort. It was a no-frills, honest loaf that fed families for pennies a slice. What's remarkable about this bread is not just how easy it is to make, but how versatile it is. While the basic recipe remained the same, many cooks got creative by adding in bits of leftover dough, incorporating bits of cornmeal, or even using leftover fat to give the bread a richer taste. Sometimes families would bake it in large batches to ensure they had enough to last for the week. And because this bread didn't require expensive ingredients or fancy equipment, it was the perfect option for people trying to make the most of what they had. In many ways, Depression-era bread is a testament to the resilience of home cooks. It's a dish that speaks to the ingenuity of the era, showing how even the simplest ingredients could come together to create something nourishing. In a time of scarcity, this humble loaf was a reminder that there was always room for warmth and sustenance at the table, no matter how tough the times were. Even today, as we mix flour and water to form this basic bread, we're not just recreating a recipe, we're reconnecting with a spirit of resilience, resourcefulness, and comfort that defined a generation. This bread wasn't just about filling bellies. It was about finding joy and comfort in the process of making something from nothing. Whether served with a bowl of soup, used to soak up gravy, or simply eaten with a dollop of butter, Depression-era bread remains a lasting symbol of making do with what you have and making it work. Baked beans and hot dogs, the ultimate budget meal. Baked beans and hot dogs might seem like an unassuming dish today, but during the Great Depression, it was the perfect example of resourcefulness. With meat being a luxury for many families, hot dogs were one of the few affordable protein sources that could be easily stretched to feed a crowd. When paired with the humble yet filling baked beans, this meal became a go-to comfort food, offering both sustenance and warmth on a tight budget. It was simple, hearty, and could be made with just a handful of basic ingredients, making it ideal for families trying to make the most of what they had. The combination of baked beans and hot dogs is one that transcends time, but its roots can be traced back to the frugal, practical mindset of the Depression era. Beans were cheap, nutritious, and filling, perfect for a time when families had to stretch their meals as far as possible. Hot dogs, while often seen as a treat today, were a budget-friendly way to add a little bit of meat to the meal without breaking the bank. Together, they created a dish that provided protein, fiber, and comfort, all in one easy-to-make meal. To make this Depression-era classic, start with a can of baked beans. During the Depression, canned goods were often an affordable and convenient option, especially when fresh produce or ingredients were hard to come by. If you had the luxury of fresh beans, they could be cooked and seasoned to your liking, but the canned variety was often what people had on hand. In a pot, heat the baked beans over medium heat, adding a little bit of water or broth if needed to help loosen the sauce. This is where you can start getting creative. Some families added a dash of brown sugar, a spoonful of molasses, or even a splash of vinegar to enhance the flavor of the beans. Next, take your hot dogs and slice them into bite-sized pieces. You can use as many or as few as needed to suit your family size. The beauty of this dish was that the hot dogs, though simple, could be sliced and stretched throughout the entire pot of beans, making it seem like there was more meat than there actually was. Brown the sliced hot dogs in a separate skillet for a few minutes until they are nice and crispy, then add them to the beans. The sizzling hot dogs bring a savory, smoky flavor that infuses into the beans, making the whole dish more flavorful. If you didn't have hot dogs, other inexpensive meats, such as bacon or leftover ham, could be used in their place. Once the hot dogs are added, let the mixture simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes, stirring occasionally. The beans will absorb the smoky flavor of the hot dogs, and the entire dish will become thick and rich. If you're lucky enough to have a little bit of onion or garlic, sautéing them with the hot dogs before adding them to the beans can add another layer of flavor. Some recipes also included a handful of mustard or ketchup for an extra tangy kick and a dash of pepper or paprika for heat. Baked beans and hot dogs were incredibly versatile. While they were most often eaten as a dinner dish, they could also serve as a filling breakfast, providing the energy needed to tackle the day. The dish could be made in large batches, and the leftovers were just as delicious the next day. This was another reason why it became a Depression-era favorite. Whether you had a family of 5 or 10, the meal could be scaled up easily, ensuring there was always enough to go around. For many families, baked beans and hot dogs weren't just a way to fill up. They were a comfort, a familiar meal that could be put together with whatever was available. It wasn't about gourmet ingredients. It was about making something satisfying from what you had on hand. The simplicity of the dish made it easy to prepare in a pinch, and it could be enjoyed by everyone at the table. Even today, baked beans and hot dogs remain a reminder of the resourcefulness that defined the Depression era. It's a dish that celebrates the art of making do with what you've got, creating something filling and flavorful without spending much money. Whether you're cooking for a family or simply looking for a quick, hearty meal, baked beans and hot dogs continue to be a timeless, budget-friendly favorite that evokes both nostalgia and warmth. And in a world where food often feels complicated, there's something refreshing about a dish that's as simple and satisfying as this one. Cabbage and noodles, a simple, filling dish. Cabbage and noodles may seem like the simplest of dishes, but during the Great Depression, it was a lifesaver for many families. When meat was a luxury and budgets were tight, this humble combination of cabbage and noodles served as a hearty, nutritious meal that could stretch a long way. Cabbage, an inexpensive and versatile vegetable, became a staple during this time, offering both nourishment and volume. Paired with noodles, which were cheap and filling, this dish not only helped feed families, it also provided a sense of comfort, something many longed for during the hardships of the era. What makes cabbage and noodles so beloved is its ability to transform basic, everyday ingredients into a satisfying meal. The cabbage, with its sweet, earthy flavor, softens beautifully when cooked, and its natural sweetness pairs perfectly with the savory richness of butter or oil. The noodles, on the other hand, are a comforting base, soft and chewy, absorbing all the flavors of the cabbage and any seasonings added to the dish. It was the kind of meal that could easily be made with whatever you had on hand, making it perfect for Depression-era cooking, where resourcefulness was key. To make this Depression-era classic, you'll begin by slicing a head of cabbage into thin strips. The cabbage is the star of the dish, so make sure to use enough to create a hearty base. In a large skillet or pot, heat some oil or butter over medium heat. Once the fat is hot, add the cabbage and sauté it until it begins to soften and turn golden brown. This caramelization process brings out the sweetness of the cabbage, giving it a deep, savory flavor that forms the backbone of the dish. While the cabbage cooks, boil a pot of salted water and cook the noodles according to the package directions. You can use egg noodles, which were commonly found in Depression-era kitchens, but any type of pasta will work just as well. The noodles should be cooked until tender but still firm, as they'll continue to soften once added to the cabbage mixture. Once the noodles are cooked, drain them and set them aside. After the cabbage has cooked down and become tender, it's time to add the noodles. Toss the noodles into the skillet with the cabbage and stir everything together until it's well combined. You can add a bit more butter or oil to coat everything, creating a rich, satisfying texture. Season with salt and pepper to taste, and if you have a bit of leftover bacon grease or sausage drippings, adding a spoonful can deepen the flavor and make the dish even more savory. Though the dish is delicious on its own, Depression-era cooks often added extra seasonings to bring out more flavor. A sprinkle of garlic powder, onion powder, or a dash of paprika could make a simple meal feel special. Some families even added a bit of cheese, or for a touch of creaminess, a spoonful of sour cream. If meat was available, small bits of sausage or bacon could be mixed in, but cabbage and noodles was often just as filling without it. This adaptability made it an essential go-to meal when money was tight, but the need for nourishment was high. Cabbage and noodles were the perfect dish for families of all sizes. It was inexpensive to make, filling, and could be prepared quickly with minimal effort. It was a staple on the dinner table, offering warmth and satisfaction when times were tough. The fact that it could be served as both a main dish or as a side to a larger meal made it even more versatile. And while this dish may not have been glamorous or extravagant, it was certainly comforting, embodying the spirit of Depression-era cooking, making the most of what you had. Even today, cabbage and noodles remain a classic, simple comfort food that evokes memories of both hardship and creativity. It's a reminder that you don't need expensive ingredients or elaborate techniques to make something delicious. By relying on basic ingredients and a little bit of creativity, you can make a meal that satisfies both the stomach and the soul. Whether you're cooking it as a quick weeknight dinner or reminiscing about the past, cabbage and noodles is the kind of dish that brings people together and reminds us that even in the simplest meals, there is beauty. Peanut soup, a nutty, unique comfort. Peanut soup might not be the first dish that comes to mind when you think of Depression-era meals, but this humble creation was a clever way to stretch ingredients and provide a rich, filling meal during times of scarcity. Peanuts, which were inexpensive and widely available, became a staple during the Great Depression, used in everything from snacks to sauces to soups. Peanut soup is a perfect example of how cooks got creative with what was on hand, transforming a simple nut into a creamy, comforting dish that could feed an entire family. The beauty of peanut soup lies in its simplicity. Peanuts were not just affordable, they were also nutritious, packed with protein and healthy fats. In a time when meat was a luxury, peanuts provided an excellent alternative, offering a hearty, satisfying base for a soup that felt rich and filling without breaking the bank. The soup's creamy texture and savory flavor were comforting, especially during cold weather, and it was a dish that could be easily scaled up to serve a large family. To make this Depression-era peanut soup, start by making a simple broth. In a large pot, sauté chopped onions and garlic in a little oil or butter until they're soft and fragrant. The sautéing process helps bring out the sweetness of the onions, adding a layer of depth to the soup's flavor. Once the onions are ready, you'll add water or broth to the pot. If you have leftover vegetable or chicken broth, that's even better, but water will do just fine. Let the broth come to a simmer. Meanwhile, take about a cup of dry roasted peanuts, unsalted if possible, and grind them into a coarse paste. In the Depression era, this could be done by hand with a mortar and pestle, but a food processor or blender works just as well today. The paste will provide the soup with its rich, creamy texture once it's blended with the broth. Add the peanut paste to the simmering broth and stir to combine. As the peanuts mix with the liquid, they will begin to thicken the soup, giving it a velvety, smooth consistency. The next step is to season the soup. Salt and pepper are essential, but you can also add other spices like cayenne pepper, paprika, or even a bit of mustard to give it a subtle tang. Some families added a touch of sugar or molasses to balance the savory flavors, creating a delicate sweetness that paired well with the nuttiness of the peanuts. Simmer the soup for about 20 to 30 minutes, letting all the flavors meld together. For added richness, some recipes call for a splash of milk or cream, but it's not necessary if you're keeping it simple. The natural oils from the peanuts provide a smooth, creamy mouthfeel that doesn't require much else. Once the soup is done, you can serve it with a drizzle of cream or a sprinkle of chopped peanuts for texture. If you have any leftover bread or crackers, they make a perfect accompaniment to soak up the rich soup. Peanut soup was more than just a filling meal. It was a testament to the ingenuity of Depression-era cooks who could turn a modest, inexpensive ingredient like peanuts into a dish that felt like a treat. It's a great example of how simple foods, when combined with a little creativity, could become something extraordinary. While it may have been born out of necessity, peanut soup became a beloved comfort food in many homes during the Depression, providing nourishment and warmth in a time of uncertainty. What makes peanut soup even more remarkable is how it could be adapted based on what was available. If you didn't have peanuts, other nuts or seeds could be used as substitutes. If vegetables were available, they could be added to the soup for more flavor and nutrition. The versatility of peanut soup is part of what made it such a staple during the Depression era. It was a dish that could be made with what you had and could be adjusted to suit the tastes and needs of any family. Today, peanut soup may not be as common as it once was, but it's still a unique and comforting dish that reminds us of the resilience and creativity of those who lived through the Depression. It's a warm, filling meal that speaks to the heart of frugal, resourceful cooking. Whether you're making it as a way to explore the flavors of the past or simply looking for a comforting, nutty soup, peanut soup is a dish that brings both history and flavor to the table. Mock apple pie, an illusion of freshness. During the Great Depression, fresh fruit was often a luxury many families couldn't afford, but that didn't stop them from craving the comfort of a good pie. Enter the mock apple pie, a clever invention born out of necessity and creativity. Made with a surprising substitute, plain old crackers, this pie gave the illusion of an apple pie without the expense of fresh apples. What's more, it didn't sacrifice flavor or satisfaction, offering a deliciously sweet dessert that became a Depression-era favorite. The beauty of mock apple pie lies in how resourceful it is. The pie's filling is made from a mixture of ingredients that mimic the texture and sweetness of apples, even though apples themselves aren't involved. Instead, the filling combines lemon juice, sugar, and a few pantry staples to create that familiar, tangy sweet pie flavor. The crackers, typically saltines, play the role of the apple slices, absorbing the sweet syrup and softening to create a texture that mimics tender fruit. The result is a surprisingly convincing dessert that is both comforting and inventive. To make mock apple pie, start by preparing your pie crust. During the Depression, homemade pie crusts were the norm, as store-bought options were often too expensive for many families. For the crust, you'll need flour, butter, a bit of sugar, and a pinch of salt. Mix the ingredients together until the dough comes together, and then roll it out into a circle large enough to line a pie pan. Once the crust is in place, set it aside while you make the filling. For the filling, you'll begin by crushing about 30 saltine crackers into small pieces. The crackers will act as the base for the apple texture, so be sure to break them into small, uneven pieces to give them that slight variation in texture that mimics the irregularities of apple slices. In a saucepan, combine sugar, water, lemon juice, and a little bit of cream of tartar, which helps give the pie its tart apple-like flavor. Bring this mixture to a boil, stirring occasionally until it thickens into a syrup. Once the syrup has thickened, remove it from the heat and stir in the crushed crackers, allowing them to absorb the syrup and soften. The mixture should now resemble a chunky, sweet filling, just like a traditional apple pie filling, minus the apples. Pour the cracker filling into the prepared pie crust, spreading it out evenly. For the top crust, you can either create a full top crust or a lattice design, depending on your preference and what you have on hand. Either way, make sure to seal the edges of the crust to keep the filling in place. If you want a little extra sweetness, brush the top crust with a bit of milk or melted butter and sprinkle it with sugar before baking. Bake the pie at 375 degrees for about 45 minutes, or until the crust is golden brown and the filling is bubbling. The result is a warm, golden pie that smells just like apple pie fresh from the oven. Once the pie has cooled, slice it up and prepare to be amazed. The crackers have softened to create a surprisingly apple-like texture, and the lemony, sugary syrup creates the sweet and tart balance typical of a classic apple pie. Mock apple pie wasn't just a practical solution, it became a beloved Depression-era dessert. The magic of the pie wasn't just in its ingredients, but in how it made the best of a difficult situation. Even without fresh apples, the pie captured the essence of a comforting, familiar treat that helped bring a little sweetness to hard times. It was a way to indulge in a slice of tradition, even when the ingredients for such indulgence weren't easily accessible. This pie also showed the spirit of innovation that defined the Depression era, finding new ways to create familiar comforts out of whatever you had on hand. While it might seem surprising to use crackers in a pie, it's a perfect example of how food during the Depression was about making do with what was available and turning the ordinary into something extraordinary. Today, mock apple pie stands as a testament to the creativity and resilience of Depression-era cooks, showing us that with a little resourcefulness, you can always make something sweet, even when times are tough. Whether you're looking for a fun historical recipe to try or simply want to experiment with a unique twist on a classic, mock apple pie offers both nostalgia and innovation. It's the perfect reminder that sometimes the best dishes come from the simplest of ideas, especially when they're born out of a need to make something from nothing. Jell-O salad, the sweet and savory trend. In the 1930s and 1940s, Jell-O became a pantry staple, and its popularity exploded during the Great Depression. It was cheap, widely available, and could be made into a variety of colorful, eye-catching dishes. Jell-O salads, in particular, were an iconic Depression-era creation, combining the simple gelatin with fruits, vegetables, and even meat in some cases, to create a dish that was both a novelty and a comforting meal. These jiggly, brightly colored creations became a hallmark of the era, served at everything from family dinners to church socials and potluck gatherings. What makes Jell-O salad such an interesting dish from the Depression era is its versatility and its ability to stretch the ingredients on hand. People during the Depression were masters of adapting to what they had, and the gelatin, with its ability to take on nearly any flavor, became a popular base for many different types of dishes. Some versions were sweet, made with canned fruits and whipped cream, while others took a more savory turn, combining vegetables or meats with the gelatin. Regardless of how it was prepared, Jell-O salad was designed to be inexpensive, filling, and visually appealing. Perfect for times when cooking for a crowd on a budget was a necessity. To make a classic Depression-era Jell-O salad, you'll begin by selecting a box of flavored gelatin. Popular choices included strawberry, lime, or lemon, which were easy to find and fairly inexpensive. Start by boiling about a cup of water and dissolving the gelatin in the hot water. Once the gelatin is completely dissolved, add another cup of cold water and let the mixture cool slightly. For a fruity version, you'll need canned fruit. Canned fruit was a key ingredient in many Depression-era kitchens because it was affordable, long-lasting, and could be used year-round. Drain the fruit, reserving the juice, and chop it into bite-sized pieces. Pineapple, peaches, or pears were common choices, but any type of canned fruit could be used depending on what you had available. The idea was to pack the Jell-O with as much sweetness and color as possible. Once the gelatin mixture has cooled, add the chopped fruit and stir gently. For an extra creamy texture, many recipes called for adding a dollop of whipped cream or sour cream, which would help balance out the sweetness of the gelatin. This step gave the salad a rich, indulgent feel, making it seem like a special treat, even though it was inexpensive to make. If you wanted to add a bit of crunch or texture, you could also add nuts, such as walnuts or pecans, or even marshmallows. Some variations included a handful of shredded coconut, which not only added a unique flavor, but also made the salad look more festive. Once the mixture is fully combined, pour it into a mold or a simple bowl. Cover it with plastic wrap and refrigerate for several hours or overnight. As the gelatin sets, it will firm up and hold the ingredients in place, creating a wobbly, colorful salad that's as fun to look at as it is to eat. For savory Jell-O salads, the process was nearly identical, but the ingredients were quite different. Instead of fruit, these salads often featured vegetables like carrots, peas, or celery, or even pieces of cooked chicken or ham. Instead of the sweet creaminess from whipped cream, these savory versions would rely on mayonnaise or sour cream to bind everything together. While some might have found these combinations odd or unexpected, they were a clever way to stretch what little meat or vegetables were available, while adding an element of surprise and creativity to the meal. Despite its sometimes quirky flavor combinations, Jell-O salad was a beloved dish during the Depression. It was easy to make in bulk, could be served cold to help cool off in the summer months, and offered a sense of novelty and indulgence that many families sorely needed. The bright, vibrant colors of the gelatin and fruit helped lift spirits and provided a bit of brightness in an otherwise challenging time. At gatherings, Jell-O salad would often be the centerpiece of the table, visually appealing and surprising in its versatility. Jell-O salads are also an example of how, even in tough times, people found ways to make food fun. The dish helped families make the most of limited resources by turning basic pantry staples into something memorable and, dare we say, impressive. While the practice of making savory Jell-O salads has fallen out of favor in recent years, the sweet versions remain a nostalgic favorite for many, reminding us of a time when home cooks were masters of transformation, turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary. Today, Jell-O salads might seem like a relic of a bygone era, but they remain an enduring symbol of Depression-era cooking ingenuity. Whether you make it with fruit or veggies, with whipped cream or mayonnaise, this dish encapsulates the creativity and resourcefulness of a generation that made the best of what they had. Even when times were tough, a colorful Jell-O salad on the table meant that, for a brief moment, everything could feel just a little bit sweeter. Fried cornmeal cakes, a crispy, savory snack. Cornmeal was a pantry staple during the Great Depression, prized for its affordability, versatility, and filling nature. One of the simplest and most beloved ways to prepare it was by making fried cornmeal cakes. These crispy golden cakes were easy to whip up with just a few basic ingredients, and they could serve as a snack, side dish, or even a full meal. With the cost of meat rising, fried cornmeal cakes offered a satisfying, inexpensive alternative that could be made quickly and in large batches, perfect for feeding hungry mouths. The beauty of cornmeal cakes lies in their simplicity. The basic ingredients are few: cornmeal, water, salt, and sometimes a little flour to help bind the mixture. They were fried in hot oil, creating a crispy exterior, while the inside remained soft and slightly grainy, giving them a satisfying texture. Though they were often served plain, the cakes could be dressed up with a little butter, syrup, or honey for sweetness, or served alongside beans, vegetables, or meat if available. To make fried cornmeal cakes, you start by mixing cornmeal with a pinch of salt and a bit of flour to help the cakes hold together. Add enough water to create a thick batter. Think of it as a doughy consistency that will hold its shape when you fry it. If you want to make the cakes a bit more savory, you could also add a dash of pepper, a pinch of garlic powder, or even a handful of finely chopped onions. Once your batter is ready, heat a bit of oil or bacon fat in a skillet over medium heat. You want the oil hot enough that the cakes will sizzle when they hit the pan, but not so hot that they burn quickly. Scoop spoonfuls of the batter into the skillet, pressing them down slightly to form small, round cakes. Fry the cakes for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side, or until they are golden brown and crispy. You may need to adjust the heat as you go to ensure they cook evenly without burning. Once the cakes are crisped to perfection, remove them from the pan and place them on a paper towel to drain excess oil. Fried cornmeal cakes were incredibly versatile. They could be served as a side dish to a stew or soup, adding a crispy texture to balance out a soft, hearty meal. They also worked as a breakfast food when paired with syrup or honey, turning the humble cornmeal into a satisfying start to the day. In some households, the leftover cakes could even be reheated for another meal, making them a cost-effective choice for busy families. What made these cakes particularly popular during the Depression was their ability to stretch basic ingredients into something substantial. Cornmeal was cheap, and with just a few pantry staples, you could feed a family without breaking the bank. In times when meat and dairy were luxuries, fried cornmeal cakes provided a hearty and filling meal. They were a symbol of the resourcefulness of Depression-era cooks who knew how to make the most of what they had. Today, fried cornmeal cakes continue to remind us of the creativity that came out of necessity. They're a simple dish that's still enjoyed by many, whether served as a snack, a side, or a main dish. With their crispy texture and satisfying flavor, they're a delicious way to connect with the past and celebrate the ingenuity of those who made do with what they had. Tomato gravy, a Southern classic. Tomato gravy is a simple yet flavorful Depression-era dish that became a beloved staple in many Southern kitchens. Made with canned tomatoes, flour, and a bit of fat, often bacon drippings, this gravy was inexpensive to prepare and provided a hearty, comforting sauce for biscuits, rice, or mashed potatoes. It was a perfect example of making the most out of basic pantry staples. To make tomato gravy, start by sautéing onions and garlic in some bacon drippings or oil. Add canned tomatoes with juice and simmer. Stir in flour to thicken the sauce and season with salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar to balance the acidity. The result is a rich, tangy gravy that's both savory and comforting. Tomato gravy was a go-to dish when fresh ingredients were scarce, offering a warm, satisfying meal for families. Today, it remains a nostalgic dish for many, evoking memories of resourceful cooking during tough times. Poor man's steak, a tasty, meaty illusion. Poor man's steak was a Depression-era dish created to mimic the experience of eating a hearty steak without the expense. It was typically made from ground beef, seasoned and shaped into patties, then pan-fried to give the illusion of a steak dinner. Often paired with mashed potatoes, gravy, or vegetables, it provided a filling, flavorful meal without the luxury of actual steak. To make it, you simply mix ground beef with breadcrumbs, onions, and seasoning, then form the mixture into patties and cook them in a skillet. Sometimes, a rich gravy made from beef drippings would be poured over the patties to enhance the dish. Though simple, poor man's steak gave families a way to enjoy the comforting flavors of a meat-based meal without the high cost, embodying the resourcefulness of Depression-era cooking. Depression-era fruit salad. No fancy ingredients, just what's on hand. During the Great Depression, fresh fruit was often too expensive, but canned fruit became a popular alternative for making fruit salad. This simple dish was a way to add something sweet to the table, made from whatever canned fruits were available, usually a mix of peaches, pears, or pineapples. Sugar or syrup from the cans helped add sweetness, and sometimes a dollop of whipped cream or a sprinkle of nuts gave it a little extra flair. To prepare, you drain the canned fruit, chop it into bite-sized pieces, and combine it in a bowl. The syrup from the cans could be used as a dressing, making the fruit salad both refreshing and budget-friendly. Depression-era fruit salad wasn't about extravagance. It was about creating something sweet and satisfying from basic, affordable ingredients. Rice pudding, a creamy, comforting dessert. Rice pudding was a beloved Depression-era dessert, offering comfort and sweetness with minimal ingredients. Made from leftover rice, milk, sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg, it was an easy, frugal way to create a satisfying treat that could feed a family. To make rice pudding, cook the rice with milk and sugar, stirring occasionally until the mixture thickens into a creamy consistency. Add a dash of vanilla or spices for extra flavor, and let it simmer until everything is tender and delicious. The result is a warm, soothing dessert that turns humble ingredients into something rich and comforting. Rice pudding was not just a treat. It was a reminder of how resourcefulness and creativity could turn simple pantry staples into a memorable, heartwarming dish. Carrot pudding, a sweet, moist creation. Carrot pudding was a Depression-era dessert that made use of inexpensive and nutritious carrots. It was a simple, moist pudding made from grated carrots, flour, sugar, and spices, like cinnamon and nutmeg. The carrots added both flavor and texture, creating a unique, earthy sweetness that set it apart from traditional puddings. To make carrot pudding, combine grated carrots with flour, sugar, eggs, and spices. Add a bit of baking powder to help it rise, then pour the mixture into a greased pan and bake. The result is a rich, dense pudding with a natural sweetness that's complemented by the warm spices. Carrot pudding was an affordable way to enjoy a sweet treat, making it a cherished dessert during the Depression, when fresh fruit was often scarce and expensive. Oatmeal cake, a sweet filling slice. Oatmeal cake was a Depression-era dessert that made use of pantry staples like oats, flour, sugar, and eggs. It was a simple, hearty cake that was perfect for feeding a crowd without spending much. The oats provided a comforting texture, while the cake's sweetness came from brown sugar and a hint of cinnamon. To make oatmeal cake, combine oats with boiling water to soften them, then mix with flour, sugar, eggs, and baking powder. Pour the batter into a pan and bake until golden. The result is a moist, dense cake with a slight chewiness from the oats. Sometimes, topped with a simple icing or coconut, oatmeal cake was a frugal yet satisfying dessert that provided comfort during tough times. Green bean and bacon casserole, a comforting dish. Green bean and bacon casserole was a Depression-era recipe that used inexpensive ingredients to create a hearty, comforting dish. It combined green beans, often canned or frozen, with bacon, onions, and sometimes a creamy sauce to create a filling, savory casserole. To make this dish, start by frying bacon until crispy, then sautéing onions in the bacon fat. Add the green beans, season with salt and pepper, and mix in a bit of flour and milk to create a simple gravy-like sauce. Pour everything into a baking dish and bake until bubbly and golden. The smoky flavor of the bacon, combined with the tender green beans and creamy sauce, made this casserole a satisfying meal that could feed a family on a budget, perfect for stretching limited ingredients into a fulfilling dish. Crackers and milk, a simple, filling snack. During the Depression, when money was tight and food was scarce, crackers and milk became a comforting and frugal snack. This dish was the epitome of simplicity, requiring only basic pantry staples. Crackers, often saltines, were paired with a glass of milk for a satisfying snack that could fill a hungry stomach without costing much. To enjoy crackers and milk, just pour a glass of milk and break a few crackers into the milk. The crackers soften as they soak up the milk, creating a satisfying blend of creamy and crunchy textures. While it may seem basic, this humble snack provided nourishment and comfort in tough times, offering a simple yet effective way to stretch what little food families had on hand. Depression-era fruit cobbler, a sweet, thrifty dessert. Fruit cobbler was a Depression-era dessert that made use of canned or seasonal fruit, offering a sweet treat that didn't require many ingredients. The beauty of cobbler was its simplicity: fruit, sugar, and a basic biscuit or cake-like topping. It was a comforting dessert that could be easily made with what was available in the pantry. To make a fruit cobbler, place canned fruit, like peaches or berries, in a baking dish, then sprinkle with sugar. For the topping, mix flour, sugar, and baking powder, and drop spoonfuls over the fruit. Bake until the topping is golden and the fruit is bubbling. This warm, fruity dessert, with its sweet crust, provided a simple way to enjoy something special with minimal cost, showing how Depression-era cooks made do with what they had to create something both satisfying and delicious. As we wrap up our journey through these 25 Depression-era recipes, it's clear that resourcefulness and creativity were at the heart of every meal. These dishes weren't just about surviving, they were about making the most of what you had, turning simple, humble ingredients into something comforting and filling. The ingenuity of home cooks during the Great Depression is a powerful reminder that even in the toughest times, a little creativity in the kitchen can go a long way. Whether it was mock apple pie or fried cornmeal cakes, each recipe tells a story of resilience, thrift, and the warmth of a home-cooked meal. So, let's keep these recipes alive and remember that no matter the circumstances, food has the power to bring us together and nourish both body and soul.